My voice kind of cracked though when I was telling the story. I was getting like emotional. I could feel it. It was like, all right, welcome to the latest episode of Game Day Glare. I'm Lance. I'm with my boy E. This is the podcast for sports videographers. How's everything going today, E?
Very good. A bit in a rush to time a few fires, but other than that, life is good.
YouTube's a busy place for you. I know there's always fires on YouTube to put out. So what are you working on in YouTube these days? What do you got coming up for us?
Next one is just got to be more of a talking head video, I think. Talking about industry and things like that for beginners. And I want to get back more into the editing side of things as well. I realized like lately I've been doing a lot of reviews, been talking a lot about gear, so I want to try, which is good for like getting new viewers because people search a certain camera and that's how they find me. But I want to do good for my the people that are there all the time that actually care and watch all my videos. I want to make sure I give them tips and help them get better and stuff. So I want to go back to the editing side of things and trying to find a way to teach them a few things.
It's tricky, right? There's so much gear that you can review all the time. And then it's to break up your time and show the techniques too. Because sometimes we do techniques that we think for us are basic, but for a new beginner or somebody, they don't actually might not know that technique or might not think of that way of editing. So it's nice that you have those tutorial videos to show them. So now, drum roll. Today, well, first, today's idea came from Tuesday's game. Idris and I got to work together again. And today's topic is telling the underdog story. And for you people outside of Montreal who don't know, the Montreal Canadiens are an underdog right now. And they are making their way into the playoffs. No, they're making their way into the playoffs. And Tuesday's game, we're down 2-1, which felt like an eternity. There is 6 seconds left, and Nick Suzuki ties up the game to force overtime, and boom, we win. 30 seconds into overtime. No one, honestly, the majority of the Bell Center did not think that turn of events would happen in 36 seconds.
Oh, people were leaving.
Yeah, people were starting to leave, thinking it was over. Yeah. There was 6 seconds left. Anyway, we got a chance. So today's topic, since it's spring, basketball seasons are ending, hockey seasons are ending. Some of you guys out there might get asked to do playoff videos. So the idea is, how do we tell that story? How do we tell that underdog story? Because we all kind of really, really love that underdog story. I don't know why, if it reminds you of you or if it's just about beating the odds that people like. So we thought we'd just kind of break down on how to do an underdog story, what kind of elements you're looking to put in that underdog story. And that's how I got inspired from working with E. That's how I got inspired for this topic. Because he's the underdog on our camera team. He's the guy we just kind of leave out there and hope he survives. And then if I see him after the game, I'm like, he made it. He did it. He did it. Good for him.
There's no way you're seeing me after the game. You leave way too soon.
I did see you. Didn't notice, though. I was already getting on the elevator when I passed you. You didn't even know. You were focused.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Because I as the game was wrapping up and, like they do the interview at the end of the game and everything with a player on the ice, I was like, how long do I have to stay here? Because I'm not going to use my camera. I wasn't too sure. I was like, let me see if Lance is still there. Zoomed in. Nowhere. No one's there. Oh, he's gone.
While they're doing that interview, I unplug and I cut by the Zamboni and then I go up to the elevator right away, the backdoor elevator. I avoid the crowds, my friend. Years and years of experience.
Yeah, it's true. Oh, that's good. I wasn't in too bad of a spot where all I need is there's a bit of a slowdown when I get out there and, but just as soon as I go down the stairs, I'm good. So yeah, I do have to go through the crowd, but it's not that bad. It could be worse.
So since I just explained an example of when I was filming an underdog story in the moment and I realized the Canadiens were an underdog, have you ever been on a shoot and realized that you could have an underdog story during your shoot? Like you witnessed a big comeback or a major moment in someone's career?
Yeah, well, maybe not like that, but it's more like if we're talking about game day, it's more similar to what happened with the Canes, where like, because I remember I was there when um, Australia basketball team beat the US for their first time ever. So that was like a big moment for them, and it was exciting. And it was in Australia as well, so it was like the crowd was really getting into it. And but it's, yeah, all that to say that it's in the moment, it happens, and that's when you sort of realize it. But yeah, I think, if in most cases, well, we'll probably get into it a bit later, but I think in most cases it's more something that like you figure out before, and then you film knowing that there is a potential story to be told, and then you film accordingly to make sure that you tell that story, sort of thing. But yeah, I think sometimes, yeah, you don't really know, and then in the moment when the game ends is when you know, basically.
Well, I mean, there's different ways of doing it, right? Like, so say in your instance, basically that game happens, and then you backtrack all the things that led up to that moment, right? When you're filming it. Or if you're following an actual individual, you do your interviews with them first. You follow their perseverance, you get them to talk about all their struggles, and then you go and kind of get the B-roll to go with it. But there's some core elements that I would say an dog story needs, and I would think like struggle, resilience, adversity, heart, and then like the other night, a surprise, or like your Australia game. That was an upset, right? No one was expecting the US to lose to Australia. So those are kind of key elements that I think you need in an underdog story. Anything else that comes to your mind?
Yeah, no, that's pretty much it. Like, you just want to set up a conflict, which is the obstacle, the fact that it's never going to win or something like that, and then a resolution. Like, that's a basic story arc. Sorry, and so yeah, it's you using the fact that it's a David versus Goliath thing as the obstacle that they will hopefully overcome, and that's your story.
You want to show emotion and relatability. It's not so much about the win, right? It's more about getting to the top or facing Goliath. Like, how did David get to Goliath? Or say in high school sports where you have the number one team facing the last place seeded team. Well, the whole story is about that last place seeded team is how can they beat or climb that mountain and get to the top over this team where the odds are stacked against them. And it's for you to kind of figure out that story and how can I show the glory in being in last place or the how strong of a knit team we are, and we're going to go face the top team and we're not afraid. And that's the emotion you want to show in like an underdog story, which honestly is a nice challenge. It's nice to challenge yourself as a filmmaker, as a videographer, to kind of show the good in your team or the possibility in people.
Yeah, and just to be clear, they don't actually need to win for this story to make sense or happen. Like, I think people just assume that you need the perfect ending. Like, I made similar stories to what we've been talking about so far, where the team loses, and we've seen plenty of Disney movies or even the first Rocky, or like where the team doesn't necessarily make it at the end, but they're still quite happy with how far they've come. And yeah, you tell that story, you build it up, and then the end is a bit sad, but then you make it. Yeah, sadness is also a feeling, so it's all good in the end from a video perspective. And yeah, so they don't need to win for the story to make sense, or to be worth doing. You know what I mean? Like, you just, if you have the obstacles, the people, the stories, the things like that, then the ending is it doesn't really matter that much, to be honest.
No, because we put so much pressure on winning all the time. And I could talk about this project now. I just recently filmed a project for Hockey Canada where they paid for a kid's inscription for hockey. The kid was 15 months no hockey because he had leukemia, and he was a goalie. So I drove 5 hours to film this kid and that, and I see this kid who is just happy to be playing hockey again. And then I look at my life. My son is a goalie. And there's so much internal pressure to just win all the time, from himself, from us as parents, from scouts, from teammates, to win. But when I go in and I film this kid who is just excited to play hockey, you realize like winning doesn't matter as much as we think. It's the journey. It's getting there. For this kid, it was just putting on his equipment. And then I think, how silly am I for the night before being so stressed out that I just want my kid to win so bad, when it shouldn't matter. He should be just playing the game. He's 17, have fun. You know?
True.
Yeah.
So how did you show that from in the video? Like, did you do anything in particular to make that clear?
Yeah. So in that video, we interviewed his coach. We talked about his spirit, how he is with his teammates. We talked to some teammates, his mom, his journey. When I filmed the kid, the interview actually wasn't the greatest with the kid, because he was very, very shy. He's a clown off camera, but he was very, very shy. But I told that story because I got him in the moments with his teammates in the locker room, and you got to see, like, they're in a game, and he raises his hand at intermission. He says, "Coach, it's a close game." He's like, "Coach, all that matters is the third period." As they're entering third period, meaning like, the rest of the game's in the past. Let's just focus on now, and we could win this game. And they end up winning the game, and everyone jumps on the kid. Thank God. So it makes my story a lot better. But the touching part was, he had a teammate who was not there. He was sick or something. He FaceTimed him to tell him that the team won. He'll be back for the next game. And it was really cool to see, like, he's not worried about his win. He's like, "Hey, we won, so you get a chance to play." So that's what kind of made the story,
no, that's good.
Yeah. So, but those are things that I'm not expecting while I'm going to film that, hey, they're going to win.
Yeah.
He has a teammate that he's going to FaceTime. I just knew, I'm going to film this kid who hasn't played hockey in a long time. Let's capture as much of the moments we can. And it's hard to pull it together, but like when the mom expresses like how this kid wasn't playing for so long, and shows you the pictures of him in the hospital bed with his gloves on and his blocker and that in the hospital bed, it touches your heart right away. So you realize, like, well, he's an underdog, and he's beating the odds by beating cancer, not by beating the team across the ice, So, and these are all things that, as filmmakers, that, we have to think about, because we're telling their story. So how do we make them proud of their own story,
Yeah. Well, I think, your case is a very extreme one.
It's extreme. But like, as a dad after, like, I was like, wow, like, I'm so lucky that my son is healthy, and my son, our biggest worry is like, win the game. And then when I look at this kid, it's like, who cares? Why do I put so much pressure on winning and losing?
Yeah, no, it's true. But but like, how do we like, my question, which is probably a mean or boring one, following your story, but it's just like, how do we get something to look as emotional and as, as a great sort of story as what you just described, if I'm just a sports videographer filming my high school basketball team that doesn't have a player who left because he was sick or something like that? Like, how do you tell an underdog story without that big, perfect sort of storyline?
Honestly, sound bites of struggle, or sound bites of what the goal is, or how you're going to accomplish that goal. I think that's a way you can definitely showcase that. So it's like, get in team meetings, get some players, one-on-one talking, try and get them to talk about what the journey is and how the journey has been so far. And that will definitely add to your underdog story, because it's so different than filming a reel. A reel, you just let happen in front of you. You're filming that play, you're filming the action, and that's it. And then you do the best you can with those highlights, or, you can plan a couple shots. But telling the story, no, you have to do a bit of pre-planning, and you have to get some questions ready, and you have to try and get them to talk about where they're going and how they got there. Because that's what people want to hear. They want to hear the journey. And the reason why you're telling this underdog story is because you're trying to reach that person who's going through the same journey or has been through that journey. That's who you're going to connect with.
No, it's true. Well, I think, like, you For me, like if I'm filming a team and I want to do a story like that, basically you have to do your homework and trying to look at what the team's history is. Obviously, if they've been losing a lot, or if they had like a losing season the previous season, and it looks like this year is going to be much better, it doesn't mean that they're going to win it all. But like if they improved, whether they've got new recruits or a new coach or just things seem to going better, then you can try to run away with that sort of storyline by talking a bit about maybe getting a few players from last year talking about how things were not going so well and how they were frustrated and what did they do about it. Like, did they train over the summer? Did they do something different? And blah blah. Sort of build up the next season, and then you got your video. And this is probably more for like a end of year video where you do like the story of the season and tell it that way. If it's a game in particular, it probably needs to have some type of rivalry. Maybe like if you're playing a school that you're playing every year and you've lost the last 2 or 3 games against them. So like this one is the big one that you're tired of losing and you really want to win this one. So you try to tell the story from a perspective of we've been losing all the time. They've got such a strong team. How hard, what are we going to do differently this time? So like you said, a lot of sound bites, few interviews, things like that. Thing to talk about how hard you've been working, just preparing for that game. And then the coach maybe like obviously giving an interview as well, with maybe sound bites during practice, like motivating the players, and then you build it up that way. And you can have all these sound bites also being used throughout the actual game. It's not like you don't have to make a documentary. Like it can be just a 2-minute video where as you build up that storyline of them being the underdog and struggling and working hard, you can show the progression of the game. It doesn't have to be like the first half of the video is them talking about how hard that game is going to be, and then the second half of the video is the game. You can sort of merge the two together and they build up sort of simultaneously. And then it's just the last few seconds, the last, like, say 10-20 seconds are like, done enough talking. Now it's the last 5 minutes of the game. Let's see what happens. We're down by 3. And now it's pure game. And then either it just they win and then fireworks, everybody is happy, or then they lose and everybody's sad and miserable. And yeah, either way, it's a great story.
It's a different challenge, right? Than just showing up and filming highlights. You're looking as a video producer is what story is worth telling and how are you going to tell that? Because you have little stories in between that team. You could have, you have the superstar who scores all the points, but maybe he struggles with school. Or you have the kid who never makes a team and finally got his chance on the varsity team. There's so many dynamics in the team. So that's what you have to try and figure out is how to tell that story. But that's the challenging part and that's the fun part because there's different ways you can tell that story. So one of the ways to film emotion, it's not just the action, right? It's the actual shots that make you feel emotion. So what are you looking for in those shots? Besides just game highlights and interviews.
Well, if we're talking during the actual game, I'd say like the key is to not stop rolling too quick. Like if something, especially in sports like football, where there's always some type of celebration after every play. So it doesn't matter if it's a defensive play or an offensive play, like just keep rolling for a few seconds. Because if someone, just celebrates, or if, someone's on the ground, teammates come pick him up, things like that. You like just little moments like that you can use to display emotion like visually on camera.
Yeah, I think that's good. That's a really good example. There's also other things you can add, like bench reactions. What else I have written there? Tunnel walk-ins. Try and get a couple games. So like you want the aftermath of a loss, the aftermath of a win. So you have those actual emotional shots that you can show while your subject is talking. You could B-roll to put over it, and that's what you're looking for. You're looking for good B-roll to put over your talking heads, your interviews. And when you're using the voiceover part, it's really good. You're gonna be happy. You could shoot at a high frame rate and put some slow motion shots, some 120K frame rate that you shot, some nice slow motion shots. Slow motion will definitely get you over the top for emotion, whether it's someone walking in after a loss or walking into the gym. All those little off court moments have a little bit more impact when you're storytelling. Or the coach subs out a player, and that player isn't ready to come out of the game, and you capture his face like he's not happy. You want that. You want those little extra shots. You're not worried about him making the basket. You want to capture his essence, his reactions. That's what you're kind of looking for, because it's not easy to build that pace of emotion. So while you're working on these stories, you want to try and stockpile all the emotional clips you can get, and let that player's face tell the story, for sure, for sure.
Yeah, but also like when you say pace, like that's also good. Like a good storytelling technique is to really use the pace at your advantage. So like if you want to build up emotion, usually you want to let a bit of breathing space between, especially like an emotional moment. Like you want to like instead of saying like let's go there and kick some ass, it's like let's go there, wait a little bit, build it up and kick some ass. Like it's just like
Yeah, yeah.
adding little pauses, just
Like,
make it more dramatic sort of thing. So usually you use it more as a voiceover and you put like B-roll over it, but like so that way you can spread things out, let it breathe, create like a dramatic pause here and there when needed, and that definitely helps. Like especially if it's during an emotional moment. I don't know if the sentence I used was very emotional,
no, no.
okay. but
Kick some asses
yeah.
emotionally. Kick some asses are
Yeah,
emotional,
yeah.
right?
True. But yeah, there's techniques like that to just and with audio as well. If you can have commentary, depending on what you're filming, like if you're filming a sport with that has commentary, that also helps a lot because you can use the commentary to tell the story of the game without necessarily having the footage. Like, you can hear because you're talking about reactions and things like that, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this are thinking, yeah, well, that's all good and well, but like I still have to film the game, and it's hard to film the game and then film the reaction and film this and film the crowd and that and that. So but if you have commentary, it kind of helps because you can have the commentary saying, oh, this guy passes it to that guy, then he scores, and then visually you don't actually see it, you just see a coach being super happy or a crowd being like so like disappointed, and just because you hear the commentary, you don't you totally understand, it all makes sense. But so yeah, so if you can have like audio cues that will tell the story for you, then you can use all your time to concentrate more on emotions, and it doesn't really matter if you miss a touchdown or a big basket or something like that.
Well, you just said it all there. Audio cues. Audio will build emotion, whether it's sound effects, whether it's the score you're using, whether it's a commentary, whether it's an interview or players talking amongst themselves. The audio is what will carry your story. So use those sound effects or those breathing effects or whatever it is that you feel goes with your story. Use those wisely, because that is how you're going to build emotion. Whether your score is rising or falling down, cut on those beats or leave maybe some dead silence. Say if a guy hits a game-winning shot and your team loses, well, you can cut to no sound and then fade in that buzzer later on for emotion. There are so many tricks to be creative. Um, and it's weird. Like, I don't really do it. But I do notice in like documentaries and stuff that I watch is they use different color palettes, like warmer for when things are going better, cooler when for things are not. So that's another creative way too that you can kind of do that. What kind of editing tricks would you use to kind of build emotion?
Yeah, well, like obviously the ones we just mentioned, whether it's the pacing and everything that has to do with audio. Also, like I'm not too sure to like and it's been done a lot. I don't know, people are kind of scared, but playing with the timing of things, like maybe changing the a bit of the chronological order of how things happen. Like for example, if a game finished 3-2, but it was like or maybe not 3-2 is probably not a good example, but like if it finishes like 6-5, and then you can build it up in a way that sort of either they're always because they're in a game or not, or maybe early on there was like 5 goals and they were just destroyed, nobody believed in them, and then they came back, where in reality maybe it's not exactly like that it happened. It was probably a bit closer, but yeah, just changing the order a bit just to make the video a bit more exciting. But depending on what the purpose of the video is, sometimes you can't really do that. Like if you're just telling a story for, pure entertainment value, like when you're saying these Hollywood movies like based on a real story, um you know not all these games finished at the buzzer, like, what I mean, but in the movies they do. So it's one of those things that, like, if you're just like making a pure underdog story for the emotional and entertainment value, then you can play with these things. If you're actually recapping a game for the fans, most of them will say like, hold on, this is not what happened. But so you have to be careful. But yeah, like playing with the chronological order of a few things sometimes can be very helpful. Or maybe keeping the best goal for the end, like swapping two goals just to make it more dramatic at the end, things like that.
Or you can show the real goal, and you could show a shot of player reaction that maybe happened earlier that has more emotion. There's ways around it, you know?
No. Yeah. What about you? Do you have any tricks?
Okay, so I had this question written down I was gonna ask you, but I'll just put it out there. So I wrote, how do you use editing to make a 2-minute video feel like a whole journey? Because it's something that probably most of our viewers would struggle with. Because we're not making 10-minute features or half-hour videos on these underdog stories, right? It's mostly like for socials or their Facebook, Instagram, whatever, 2-3 minutes. So it's the challenges of telling that story fast, but making it feel like a journey. So you want to take a stab at it first, or you want me to take a stab at it first?
Yeah, well, I think I've already kind of touched on this earlier, where it's, yeah, because I think like the biggest mistake that people do is that they'll spend the first half of the video building up that game, and then the second half of the video will be the game. So that makes it like a 5-10 minute video, whatever, where you can merge all of this together and keep it a 2.5 minute video. Like, I remember I did this once with this very niche, like it was Australian football, but it was like an international tournament for kids. And so there was a team coming from Indonesia, and their coaches were Australian. And but in Indonesia, like they would practice like normally you play Australian football on a cricket pitch, like it's a huge oval, it's on grass. They obviously don't have that in Indonesia because cricket is not part of their culture either. So they practice like on basketball courts and things like that. And you're supposed to tackle people on the ground. So obviously they don't tackle much. So basically they've trained, like they understand the rules, but they've never actually played the real game the way it's supposed to be played. And it's their first time. And so we're filming the game. And so as I interviewed like the I think we did all the interviews after, but the way we built the video was like basically it starts. I talk a little bit about Indonesia, like when I say I talk, I get one of the interviewees. I talk about Indonesia and how they train and things like that, and then really early in the video, the kickoff or whatever it's called, like starts, and then the game builds up, and as the game builds up, yeah, you get all these interviewees, players and coaches talking about how they train and why they're here and the expectations, and they've never actually won a game in their life, and they lost two in their first two in the tournament. This is their last chance of winning a game, and all these different things. And the game progresses. You see, like, you see them passing all in slow motion, and then you see them getting hurt, and at some point it starts raining, and it's all this slow motion rain action and all that sort of stuff. And then at the end they start getting back, and they're close, and they're like one kick away, and then the other team wins at the last second, and then you see players on the ground crying, and then the coach, like in the interview, just like now at this point he's on camera and he's crying as well, saying like, I wanted it so much for them, and we were so close, and blah blah. And but all that took like 2.5 minutes, like, or whatever, because it was telling that story obviously I didn't go to Indonesia to shoot all their training and their background and stuff. So I was telling that story as the game was progressing. So by the time we get it and we're emotionally involved and attached to these guys, then it's already the fourth quarter and they're going back and forth. And yeah, it's you can tell those two stories a bit like in a movie or a TV show. There's always a main plot and a subplot. Then it's the same kind of concept where I don't know which one's the main one and which one's the sub one, but you know, you're progressing the game, but you're progressing the underdog story simultaneously, and they all sort of come and meet at the very end of the video.
You're having your subplot and your plot. That's what you need. The only trick that I have to add to it, since like you basically explained it, everything. The only thing
I talk too much. Is that
no,
what you're
no,
saying?
it's perfect. It was perfect. I was just saying that the hardest thing to do as a videographer is like, so I do all these interviews, and you've been there. You do all these interviews, and these people give great sound bites, and you put them on your timeline, and it's too long, and you got to trim this stuff. So it's a real art of finding the right sound bite. And the reason why you want to find that right soundbite that's not too long, not too short, and just impactful is because that is how your viewer is going to relate with your subject. Like how you said at the end, the coach said, I just want this so bad for them. He probably had a whole bunch of other stuff explaining, like, hey, we never really practiced and that. We came here and I want this so bad for them. But when you show the emotion and it's raining and people upset and you say, I wanted this so bad for them, that's what makes your story. So that's the hardest part, is do not get attached to your footage. I am guilty of it. I am so guilty. I'm sure you are too. We watch stuff and I'm like, oh, I love this shot. And I try and fit it in my video and it just doesn't work. And then I'm like, delete. And that is the tricky part. So don't fall in love with anything. Just tell your story and make sure your viewer falls in love with the characters.
Yeah. And with interview, like with sound bites like that, like sometimes, you know, let's say the coach is saying something that you really want to put in the video, but it takes him like 20 seconds to say it. And you're like, realistically, I want him to say that in 7 seconds. So you can do that. Like you just need to cut and, you know, match words here and there because you're using it as a voiceover, and maybe just like the last part or the beginning and the end you'll show on screen, but for the rest there's going to be overlay on top of it. So, you know, trim all the fat, cut all the parts that you can get rid of so that it's a clear and concise like sort of message. And then you can easily depends what's being said, but you can turn a 20-second answer into a 7-second answer. It's easier than you think, to be honest. Like we always, like you said, like we assume that like, oh no, I need this, but really when you cut a few things, and maybe at the end he's not saying exactly what he was saying in real life, but it is the same message. It is something that like, because like you see it in reality TV all the time, like when they do these on-camera comments, it's always like a zinger or something like that. It's not like these people are all like TV trained. It's just the producer will be there. So what do you think of when that person did that? And they'll give like a long, boring answer. So the producer will say, all right, so would you say that basically you didn't like when she did this and you were super angry because of that? And I say, well, yeah, that's pretty much what I was trying to say. All right, well, just say that. And then, you know what I mean? Like, so it's, they'll do what we do in editing in real life. Like they'll tell me what you're trying to do, what you're trying to say, and I'll tell you exactly how to say it so that it's interesting on camera. And because that person's the expert and you're not, you're just kind of, oh yeah, thank you. So now you're making me sound good. I'd much rather do that, even though those aren't my words, but it is your idea.
Yeah, you can coach your interviews a lot. You could give them, you know, you say if they said that sentence and it took them a long time, you coax them into saying just that sentence. Or one of the tricks that we always do, is when you ask a question, what do? You get the person to repeat the question. So if you're ever stuck and you don't know how to introduce that subject, well, you have them saying the question you just asked them. You know, like, oh, the first time I laced up my shoes and got on the court, and boom, you have that segue. So those are little ways to tell that story. There's a couple other tricks though too to prep your story. Ask the coaches or athletes, like, hey, is there anything I'm missing, or what's the story behind this guy? Look for those things that you might be able to add in to give extra emotion, because you're going to show up and you're going to have a plan in your head, and there's other things going on that you're not aware of. So don't be afraid to ask and interact with the team, or the people in charge of the team, and ask if there's any background stories or anything that is interesting that you don't know of that can help tell your story, because I guarantee you there's something else out there that you didn't realize.
No, I agree. But I think, like, yeah, for me, like, prepping is mainly about just doing your research and trying to find, like, if it's not, like I was saying at the beginning, a rivalry or something like that, maybe it's a player that has an interesting story, or a staff member. It could be like the coach, the equipment manager. It could be like anyone on the team that has like a perspective that could be interesting to follow, and includes a bit of an up and down either throughout the game or throughout the week or the season.
Yeah, no, prep work is key, right? Because you're going to be around the team, so you're going to like try and look for things, body language, who interacts with who's the guy who's early to practice, who's the guy who leaves late. These are all things that you can add into your edit and into your story. So really pay attention to what's going on with that team.
So do you have like a favorite underdog story that you've worked on? Was it the one you mentioned before?
The one that I just
Tough
did
to beat.
yeah, the one I just did last week is fresh in my head. So it's hard to kind of get past that. There was one. It kind of all worked out 2 years ago. I'm at the Telus Cup, and we do an interview before the Telus Cup starts with one of the head coaches. Well, actually, he was assistant coach then. He's a head coach now. He's assistant coach. The team that he's coaching for, when he was younger, he played in the Telus Cup, lost in the finals. Okay, but he was still a champion of his conference, went to Telus Cup. So the whole story was about him, and how cool it was that he did this whole 360. Now he's back, giving back to the program that he was in. You know, from going to Telus Cup, which was such great memories, to coaching. Now they lost the Quebec finals. They lost the Quebec finals to the host team, but since Quebec was a host team, 2 teams went. So whoever made it to the finals, both Quebec teams went. And his team ended up playing that same team again in the finals, and they won the Telus Cup. But for me, it was cool because we interviewed him a week earlier, and he was talking about how he lost when he was a player. And then I got to interview him after his team just won the Telus Cup as a coach. And he said it was so much more rewarding winning this as a coach than if he ever could have imagined winning it as a player. Because he said he had got to help 22 other people achieve their dream instead of him just being a player achieving his dream. So it was kind of cool. Like, it's not so much of an underdog story, but the timing kind of worked out that, you know, they picked this one coach to interview who was participated, and then he ends up turning around and winning a week later. So it was great for our story because it got tons of views, because now he was a champion. So you got to see him talking about what it was like to go to Telus Cup and that. So that was one that I can definitely think of. What about you? You have any underdog stories that you can think of before we wrap this up?
I think the 2 that I've mentioned are probably my top. Like, well, because that one, that Australian football one, was pretty cool because I didn't know what I was getting myself into. Like, there was a producer that was working for me at the time that sort of set it up and just went along filming, and it's sort of throughout the game that I'm realizing, because they're not very good, but it's not like you're not there for the quality of the game, but just like they're so into it, and they're so emotional about every little thing that's happening that you don't have any choice to, get into it as well. And the few, like, obviously the Indonesian teams, like their families didn't travel with them, but and when I say kids, they were probably like in their, I don't know, late teens, early 20s. And so their families are not there, but the Australians, because there's a lot of Australians that go to Indonesia, so like the coaches, like their friends are there, and they're probably people that have seen that team play. So like there's actually people there like rooting for them and getting really emotionally involved and all that. So like, yeah, as you realize, you're seeing all of this, you don't really have a choice than to get into it as well, and for it to finish just like so close. Like, it was just like, yeah, in the movies where it was almost perfect, but then it all went crashing down at like 2 seconds before the end. So it was one of these like perfect story for a video, but not for them. But so yeah, that one was very, very cool to watch and capture. And the Australian the basketball thing was cool as well, just because it was, they're beating the US, so it was which has been done a few times, but for Australia, I think like Australia now is like, since then I think they started getting like respected. But before that, no one really saw them in the top 5 or anything. But since then, they've pretty much, they won the bronze at the Olympics and things like that. So now they're a bit more. They've got a bit more respect on their name, but it wasn't the case back then. So they were quite happy with it, and can totally, if Canada beat the US at basketball, I'm pretty sure would be super excited about it as well. So even though we've got the team that probably the on paper as the best chance of actually doing it. But anyway, that's a whole other
that's a whole other podcast. That's a whole other episode. Canada's basketball, the state of Canadian basketball.
Exactly. But yeah, those are probably the two main ones. I've probably filmed a couple more, but nothing to that extent.
I've done plenty of player profile videos or where they're from videos and they all have a bit of underdog in it, because they all have, you came from this small town, you grew up playing, no one really gave you a chance. So there are tons of underdog stories out there. It's just fun this time of year when teams are getting ready for their playoff runs and stuff, that they promote themselves as underdogs, because everyone does like being the underdog. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain. It's a lot harder being on top of that mountain than below it, because when you're on the top, you got to stay there, and it's so hard to stay there. So that's why we thought this was an interesting topic. Now, you got any final tips before we wrap this up, E, for people who might have to do a playoff video or show that underdog story?
Final tip would be pay attention, listen to what's going on and what's happening, just realize what's going on and make the most of it, because sometimes it's easy to just get caught up into filming the action and not realizing that you're lucky enough to be part of an event that is bigger than just the action on the field. So pay attention, and when you realize that this is it, then film accordingly and make sure that you film a bit more at the bench, and trying to get, if you can get close enough to get some audio from the coach or things like that, then try to do so, and just make the most of that moment, and so that afterwards you can produce a video that's going to be so much more emotional, has such a bigger, more interesting story than all the other ones, and it's definitely going to be your most popular one if you do like weekly videos or something like that. Just make the most of that opportunity to make a super great and also different video from what you usually do.
Yeah, make that video that gives them goosebumps, or in here we'd say frisson, right? They frisson. You want goosebumps. You want them to be excited. You want them to be like, wow, we could do this, or wow, they almost did it. You want people to feel that. So if you guys have anything, any videos like that you're working on, underdog stories or playoff projects, just share in the comments below. We'd love to check them out. We'd love to talk about it. And I'll leave you guys on this little quote that I wrote down. Don't chase perfection, chase the connection. Okay. It's show emotion, show the emotion. That's what people want to see in these stories. They want to feel like they're there. They want to feel like they connect with that person you're sharing or that team. And that's what's going to make your video very, very good and successful.
All right. Is that quote from someone famous, or is it like a Lance LeBurge?
No, it was just in my notes. Don't chase perfection, chase connection. It was just in my notes. It's on your notes if you see too.
Yeah. Well, but I was just wondering if you came up.
I'm a different guy since I filmed that story 2 weeks ago, when I realized winning isn't everything. I tell my kid, win. And then I realized, like, I looked at it all wrong. It really, really changed my perspective. And honestly, I felt, I almost felt silly. We put all this pressure, and I see this other guy who's just excited to be playing. All right. Well, I guess that's it for our underdog story. We'll see you guys next week on the next episode of Game Day Glare. Take care.